Hello and welcome to the Greatest Games podcast brought to you by 816 Basketball. I'm one of your hosts, Brian Rosefield, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris de Blasio.
Thank you for welcoming me as always, Brian. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure.
As we know, the Greatest Games podcast is a chance for us to catch up with basketball coaches from around the country and have them tell us about their greatest games they were a part of as a coach. We don't put any limits. It could be their time as an assistant coach, a head coach, B-team coach. It could be a win, a loss, a state championship, the first game they ever coached, just whatever they consider to be their greatest game.
Well, today's a special one for me. So today we're welcoming in John Combs, who just finished his first season as the head boys basketball coach at Westwood High School in Blythewood, South Carolina. But it's special for me because known John for a long time. He gave me my first shot as his JV coach at Ridgeview High School. So, John, welcome on in.
Well, Brian, Chris, thank you all very much for having me in today. It's certainly exciting to be here.
You sound terribly excited, too.
I am. I'm super excited. I mean, I'm on with you two dudes. So, I mean, what else a person could be happy with on a Tuesday night? It is Tuesday night, right? Who knows what night?
Who knows what night we're recording this? There might be a little, for those listening, there might be a little inside basketball, a lot of inside jokes and inside stuff because John and myself and Brian have known each other for going on 20 years now. We worked together at the University of South Carolina. Then I helped out at Ridgeview as a volunteer with you guys. So we've been through the ringer, the three of us.
Yeah, we're getting old for sure.
Gosh, tell you what, the gray hairs that I have and the hairs that I used to have are certainly evidence of that. I tell you what.
John, I was 23 when I met you.
Was that? Gosh, that was a long time ago. Great thing.
So you were 23 when you started at USC, Blas?
Yeah. Right out of college, I got the job at Kentucky. I was 21 when I got hired at Kentucky. I had just graduated. I hadn't even turned 22 yet.
How about that? And John, you were at that point, you were the special assistant at that point, right?
Blas, what year was that when you started?
Was 2000, 2001 season. It was Greg Taylor, Mike Boynton, and Rolando Howell were freshmen.
Yep. That was my last year at South Carolina with Coach. That was Coach Fogler's last year.
Yes.
At South Carolina. Yeah, remember that very, very well.
How about that? Those were good days for me. I'll tell you what, I was living the dream, being a student manager at the time, wiping up sweat for those guys that I'd idolized for a couple of years and filling up water bottles. And I tell you what, I'll never forget sitting in the back of that team meeting room when Coach announced his retirement. I was just stunned and I couldn't believe it. It was what a moment that was.
It was a very difficult moment, and the only thing that was probably more difficult than that moment for me was when we lost to UConn and the NIT, which ended up being our last game. And those are just some of those things you just remember. It was certainly a very difficult moment for sure.
Well, John, why don't you bring us through your resume as a coach? Just kind of talk about the places you've coached and worked that got you to where you are today at Westwood.
Well, my love of basketball really started when I was at Irmo High School, and I worked with the Irmo High School basketball program. I was a student manager there. I wasn't quite good enough to be a player, and I always kind of joke around and tell people that me and BJ Mackey were a package deal. Since I got BJ, I decided to go along as well. So, we were able to kind of make that work. I was a student manager with Coach Fogler, as we alluded to earlier, for 4 years. And then Coach Fogler was so gracious enough when Coach Jeff Lebo got an opportunity to become the head coach at Tennessee Tech. And he bumped up Barkley Radeball to give me an opportunity to be the special assistant at the time with him. And then I was there for 3 years with him with that. And then when he resigned, it basically meant I resigned as well. And thank you. Have a good day. It started my high school coaching career. Had an opportunity to do some small college, junior college opportunities. but it's nothing excited me. So I have the opportunity to go be an assistant basketball coach and a teacher at Spring Valley High School, and I was there for 3 years before I got my first head coaching job in the mid 2000s at Silver Bluff High School. I was there for 1 year. And then after that, I was very fortunate to get the head boys basketball coaching job at Ridgeview High School, where we were there for 11 great years. I had a lot of good times, and then I ended up for 3 years. I left Ridgeview to go to Ben Lippen School. That's where my daughters go to school, and I wanted to be closer to them. So I spent 3 solid, very educational years there. And then this past year, I was at Westwood High School, as Brian alluded to earlier. So I'm back in Richland School District 2, and so that's the Cliff Notes version of my resume so far.
I completely forgot you were at Silver Bluff for a year. Now, when you said it, it triggered my memory, and I remember you being there for that year. Yeah, I forgot.
It was really, I was so fortunate that I don't even realize how fortunate I was to get that job as my first head coaching job. The reason I say that is because we were really talented at Silver Bluff. We had one of their first Division I basketball players, Bobby Davis, that ended up going to USC Upstate. He went to play JUCO ball out at Hutch, and we were good. We ended up winning a region championship, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I just had really good players. So we lost in the second round of the playoffs that year to a team that had Lee Central High School that had Mike Holmes, and it was a really good game. They're a team that ended up playing for a state championship that year. But I was very fortunate that we were good at Silver Bluff that year.
Silver Bluff, is that where Brandon Wallace went to high school?
Yes, I came in the year after Brandon left.
Okay, that's why I thought he was a Silver Bluff kid.
And Brandon went on to have a great career at South Carolina and almost jumped on with the Celtics, as I remember. Like he was one of those kind of.
He was in training. He was in training camp with them. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, an assistant over at Gray Collegiate, and maybe one day we'll get him on this podcast for sure. So, I remember following you down there at Silver Bluff. I've actually got I don't know if I've ever told you this, John. I've got a newspaper article posted on one of my bulletin boards upstairs about how great of a job you were doing, and I'm trying to the writer that's escaping me right now. But it was really neat to be able to know you as a manager, and then get to see you go on and then start to do great things and be able to stay in touch with you, and then be fortunate enough to get a shot to coach with you at Ridgeview once you made that jump.
Well, certainly very fortunate to be able to, to get you to come over to Ridgeview. I mean, that was such a blessing to be able to get you to come over there. And you were the JV coach, I want to say, for 9 years.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
My last year at Ridgeview, you ended up being my boss and the athletic director. So you didn't fire me right away. So that was a good step. But that was one of the best things I ever did, to be able to get you on there for 9 years. You certainly did a great job with our JV program and just helping out our whole program and help building our culture.
Well, I appreciate that. It's kind words, very kind words. It was a time of my life, that's for sure.
I was there for 2 years, but I guess we forgot about that.
Well, the podcast is long. We still got some time to come.
Coach, let's keep this. We'll keep this to high school because obviously you worked in the SEC for a bunch of years. But we'll keep this question to high school. Who was the best player you ever coached against?
You could put the SEC in it. It doesn't matter. It's Zion Williamson.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you coached against Zion.
We coached him for 2 times at Ben Lippen, my first year at Ben Lippen. I'll never forget, I got the job at Ben Lippen, and we didn't have all of our games scheduled yet. And I remember hearing that there was some kid from South Carolina named Zion Williamson that won the MVP of the NBA Players Top 100 camp. And he happened to be at Spartanburg Day. And I've always wanted to play against really good players, and guys that, players want to look forward to playing. Real basketball players enjoy playing against other really good players. And so as a result, I remember I emailed their AD as soon as I found it out at Spartanburg Day. So, hey, do you have any games available? And I say this, I've never seen the kid play once. I just read about it. And, she agreed, and they had a couple of dates, and one of them was one in December at our place on Friday night, and one of them was in January at their place. And I had no idea at the time how good the kid was. And then it was about a week out before we played them, that I started watching the full games of him playing. And I was like, oh my God, it was unlike anything I've ever seen. I've never seen guys off of one step do a 360. I've never seen guys, they were throwing double alley-oop plays. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And when we played them for the first time, it was on a Friday night, and it was just, the buzz on him was just starting to get really, really big. Like he was starting to become that YouTube sensation. He was scoring 30, 40, 50 a night some nights, and just dunking all over the place. And well, I remember the day before practice, or day before the game, we were having a practice, and I told our guys, I said, if you give Zion a free lane to the goal, he's going to dunk on y'all hard. Y'all going to be seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Just let him have it. Well, I was wrong. That we gave him a free lane. They threw him a lob. He caught an alley-oop windmill dunk that ended up being his first ESPN #1 play of the day. So no, it wasn't seen by hundreds of thousands. It was seen by millions of people. But the kid was just unbelievable. He really was.
And that's for those that don't know Coach Combs. He is the king of just emailing people or calling people up and saying, "Let's play." When I was working with you guys at Ridgeview, we went up and played Oak Hill Academy. I mean, we just got on a bus, drove to Virginia, played, got on the bus, and drove home. And Galax, Virginia is not that close to Columbia, South Carolina, for anyone that's ever looked at a map.
It wasn't that far, but it was, yeah. But you're right. Why not? I will tell you, all the kids that we've ever coached, I truly believe they all enjoyed the trip to play Oak Hill Academy. We did it 2 or 3 different times. I always believe kids would rather play against really good competition and remember playing against a Quinn Cook or a Keith Tiny Gallon or a Deron Lamb. Even if we couldn't stop them, even if they gave us 30, they would rather play in games like that than play against somebody that they're going to beat by 30.
We did get the alley-oop dunk off a side inbounds to Mike Green the one year in Oak Hill.
Yes, I do remember that. And we've actually got a great picture of that. I mean, other than, there was times the guys that needed to competed very well. And I truly believe we were a better basketball team because we competed in those games.
I'll tell you, was that the year that he had the dunk at Oak Hill and then got a chance to dunk at Madison Square Garden too? Was that the same year, or he got that done in his career? Do you remember?
I think it was next year.
Oh,
it was the next year that we went up and played Coach DeBatista's Bishop England team in Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day, we took a train over to New Jersey and scrimmaged St. Benedict's when Danny Hurley was coaching them, and they were one of the best teams in the country.
I'll tell you, it's just I learned a lot from you, John, with that, just not being afraid to play anybody. And as I've developed my philosophy now as an AD to provide experiences for kids, geez, to go to Oak Hill, to go to Madison Square Garden, to take a train, hop a subway, go over to New Jersey and play St. Benedict's, all the things that they got to do just because of your vision and creativity. It was fantastic. And I will never forget, I tell the story all the time, getting on that airplane and it lifting off the runway with a plane full of kids. Most of them had never been on an airplane, and hear them go, whoop, 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 and just like, oh, we're in the air. Like you can't go anywhere. Like that's it. It was such a thrill.
There's no doubt. I think those experiences when you can do things like that. I mean, we even took our guys and played Calhoun County when they had Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, nobody supposedly wanted to play those guys. But I would tell you, I would bet, the Jarvis Davis of the world, Mike Green, they're glad, I'm sure, that they had a chance to play guys like that instead of playing guys that we should beat 9 out of 10 times. Now, it might not help our record, but our guys certainly enjoy that. I mean, to me, one of the best atmospheres we ever played in is when we hosted Oak Hill Academy for the first time, way back when. That was when Oak Hill had Sindarius Thorne. What? No, I'm sorry. That was the second time. It was when they had Quinn Cook,
Hmm.
and that was just a tremendous atmosphere there at Ridgeview High School.
Yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, I know a little bit about this, but I'd love for you to tell our listeners about this. But what led you to becoming a high school coach, and the things that I guess the role that you see that you play as a high school coach with these kids.
Well, to me, this has evolved over time. Now, to me, being a coach was always about wanting to help kids. It's always been about that. But it is also part of it. When I first started, I will fully admit, it was probably more about wins and losses in addition to wanting to help kids. It was about helping kids becoming the best that they can be. But over time, to me, it's more about helping them become the best man and men that they can be. I'm a lot more concerned about them being a great husband, a great father, and a great leader than I am just a great basketball coach. But I'm a firm believer that if you become the best possible man that you can be, and you pick the right guys to be a part of your bus, be a part of your program, that shouldn't sacrifice anything about you maximizing your potential on the basketball court. So, I wanted to compete at high level. I wanted to help young men. The game of basketball was really good to me. I really enjoyed it. And I felt that you can learn so much through the game of basketball to help you, grow into being a man in life.
I'll always respect that about you, and just a story to go along with that. I wasn't approved to be a coach yet. I'll never forget this. But I drove down to team camp at Coastal Carolina just to watch and start to get to know the guys a little bit and see kind of style of play. And I remember following the bus. You were driving the bus. I don't know if we were going to a game or coming back from a game. I don't know. We pulled off and parked at the track, and guys just got out and started running. So I parked next to the bus and say, "Hey, John, what's going on?" He said, "Somebody said something they didn't need to be saying, and so we're going to run." I'm like, "Well, you know what? I knew at that point I was in the right place. That your heart was in the right place. That I knew we're going to win games, but like you said, you were trying to build better men." Just watching those kids get out there running their practice jerseys, I'll never forget seeing that. I loved it.
Yeah, I actually remember that pretty well. I remember later on that trip, they were late for somewhere else. And we got them up that night. Did a little extra work as well. But I think those are things that will teach some serious lessons with young men.
Coach, talk a little bit about some of your mentors. I mean, I know you worked at high school with Tim Whipple, who's one of the great coaches in South Carolina prep basketball history, and you worked with Eddie Fogler at South Carolina. Talk about your mentors and what they taught you.
Well, Coach Tim Whipple is all about excellence. And I was a student manager. He was a guy that took very good care of me. He didn't have to. I wasn't a guy that I wasn't going to help them win games. I wasn't going to lose them any games. Excuse me. He just really took good care of me, but he expected excellence out of everybody. And seeing his preparation, just seeing his excellence, how he treated people, and you know, I just took that from him, and he always took really good care of me. I mean, he was the one that really helped me, introduced me to Coach Eddie Fogler, and gave me an opportunity to become a student manager at the next level. And then working with Coach Eddie Fogler, he treated us very well, but he expected and demanded excellence out of us as well. And just over time, I think we earned his respect by how hard we worked and what we did. And just one thing about Coach Fogler, you always had to be on time, be honest, and work really hard. Coach Fogler wasn't hard to work for. You knew exactly what he wanted and what he demanded out of you. He just expected you to work really hard and do your job, and he would let you do that. And one thing I always appreciated about Coach Fogler, you always knew where you stood with him. There was no, well, I'm not real sure what he thinks about me. He would tell you. If he didn't like something, he'd flat out tell you. Now, it may not be always the nicest thing in the world, but he'd always tell you. But he would also do everything he could for you. I mean, there was a time me and Jeff DiBattista wanted to work North Carolina basketball camp. He made a couple of phone calls. We went up there and we worked basketball camp. I wanted to go work the Michael Jordan basketball camp. He made a couple of phone calls. That was easy. He gave me an opportunity to do that. He didn't have to do that for me. And then you think about it. He gave, at the time in college basketball, I was a student manager, graduated. He gave me the opportunity to be his special assistant, which is at the time was basically the Dobo of basketball at an SEC school at a recent college graduate. I mean, that was incredible that he gave me that opportunity. And so that is something I'll always tremendously respect.
Well, it's, you remind me of a story I heard, or not a story. I was talking to a guy. I happened to meet a guy who was doing video for the New York Giants under Tom Coughlin. And he'd been with the Giants like 15 years. So before Coughlin was there, I said, is it hard to work for Coach Coughlin? Is it tough? And he said, not at all. He said, you know your job, you do your job, and everything will be fine. And, he said, it's not that hard. Everyone thinks it's difficult, thinks that he's, but do your job. Be on time, do what you're supposed to do. And he said the same thing. You always knew where you stood with Coach Coughlin. And I am going to say this. I worked for Coach Fogler for 1 year, and I loved it. And I'm still not sure if he likes me. So I'm still a little wishy-washy. But
Well, it took me years to even figure that out, that he really liked me, because he was a business guy, but he always took good care of us. I mean, and he was, if he wanted us to, as student managers, we'd go get lunch for him sometimes. He would always buy us lunch. So he took really good care of us when he certainly didn't have to. When I hear other stories, other student managers, their head coach, they didn't take care of him like Coach Fogler took care of us.
I think about Coach Fogler. I think the world of him, and I think about just great boundaries. I mean, he will be very clear with you about what he's willing to do and what he's not willing to do. And I tell you what, it's just when you left to go to Ben Lippen, and for me to call him up and to say, hey, I need some help here. If you know somebody, got to replace John. This is going to be tough. You know anybody? And then just kind of off the cuff, ask him, hey, do you want to sit in on interviews when we start? And he said, yeah, give me a call when it comes time. And so called him, and he sat in on a few of the interviews, which was fascinating to watch him in an interview process. Again, with those boundaries of just throwing out a question. And my favorite question that he asked was, so if the bus leaves at 6 and your best player is not there, it's 6:05. What do you do? And some people would answer like, well, I want to wait till 6:10. So now the bus leaves at 6:10. Well, no, I mean, we'll leave at 6. Well, then, and this watch guys just, woo, it was a real hoop in there. He's just the most caring and giving and well-boundary guy I've ever known.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still take that to this day. I mean, my last year there at Ridgeview, I remember I left a young man. We had a playoff game on the road. We were pulling out of the parking lot without him. Mm-hmm. Now he caught up to us by the end of the driveway, but but when it was time to go, it was time to go. And those are lessons that those young men have to learn, because that's the way real life works.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So I
just want to tell a quick story.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
About those lessons. I had a starter for me. We were getting on the bus, and we started heading to the game, and he pulled out his uniform and realized he had his home uniform and not his road uniform. And he said to me, what am I going to do, Coach? I said, you're not going to play. Like, well, you don't have the right uniform. And he actually said to me, he said, can I have such and such uniform, the kid who was decidedly our last player on the bench? And I said, absolutely not. He remembered his uniform. And when they were in high school, he would always bug me about this story. And I was at his college graduation party last spring, and him and a couple of the guys were sitting around, and they said, it makes so much more sense now why you didn't let me play that game. And I was like, yeah, you didn't have your uniform. It's not that difficult, actually. It wasn't a difficult decision.
Now, let me ask you this. Did you keep your policy the same thing next year? Did you start washing the uniforms and hand them out yourself?
The only time I ever had a guy bring the wrong uniform.
Okay.
Listen, I didn't start a kid 2 times this year because he didn't have his warm-up shirt with him.
Well, it's not. Guys are supposed to have what you're supposed to have. I completely agree with that.
So now you have coached. You were at let's see, so it's 13 total years in public school basketball. Is that right?
Yes, I just finished my 13th year.
Okay, so 13th year, you've made the playoffs in all 13 years, right?
No, my first year at Ridgeview, we did not
That's right. Okay, so
make.
12 out of 13 years. So the winning, my point is the winning is taking care of itself. So, but
Yes.
how do you truly define success for each team that you coach?
The reality is, I may not really fully know the success I have ever on certain kids' lives.
Mm.
But, to me, I want to win every single game we play. I do. But I remember I'd always would tell the kids a story. What would you rather be? Would you rather be 20-1, or would you rather be, say, 15-11? And they're like, "Oh, coach, that's easy. I want to be 20-1." I said, "Well, if you're 20-1, that means you had a great regular season, but you lost in the first round of playoffs. If you're 15-11, that means you played for a state championship." And then so they started thinking about that. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you trick them a little bit with that to get them to think." But to me, it's not about the number of wins. It's about the quality of wins you get, the quality of experiences. But to me, in the end, it's really how are they going to become as young men later down the road? How are they going to be as a father? How are they going to, I wonder, what are some of our young men, how are they acting now? Some of them are probably facing some serious real life situations during this coronavirus crisis. So to me, I may not fully know the total success. I mean, I've had some teams win a lot of games, but I question, did I teach them enough lessons off the court? So to me, the reality is, it's almost an ongoing thing, whether you really evaluate whether or not it was a true success from that standpoint.
That's music to my ears, and um, just there's so much more, in my opinion, at play than wins and losses, and like going back to what we're talking, telling stories about going to New York and all those experiences, getting to see that, and all the places that you took our guys at the time, like it's just incredible, and putting them in real life situations, and where it's in their verbiage is high school basketball, but now, like, you're right, that's a great point about the state of the world right now, and how our guys are handling it. And I would like to think, and I believe, that they're able to call on that experience and say, yeah, I had to run my tail off. Back to that track story. I had to run my tail off. If I can handle that, then I can handle this. They may not be able to be conscious about that, but there's just that experience after experience after experience that you're able to provide as a coach. I love that. That's music to my ears.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's all about. It really is about. I'm more aware of it now than maybe when I first started coaching. I remember something. I believe it was Coach Odom said. He first cares about his players as people, second as students, and third as basketball players. And to me, that's always stuck with me, resonated with me. And to me, that's how I want to prioritize when I coach with my players.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, the name of the podcast is The Greatest Game. So at this point, we'd love to hear about, and we know you've been a part of a lot of great games, but if you can pick one game and tell us some background information and why it's so special for you, your greatest game.
Well, I had this when I heard that y'all were doing this as part of the podcast. I thought it was awesome, and it gave me time to think about some of the greatest games I've been fortunate been a part of. One of them's a Tuesday night at ESPN against Kentucky that we beat them. We had Hootie and the Blowfish in town, Dick Vitale. They stayed up really, really late that night after the game was over celebrating. There's the win at Rupp Arena later that year on Senior Day, which ended up being Rick Pitino's last home game at Rupp Arena at Kentucky, where we won. There's even the game, the Cincinnati, Antonio Grant hitting it. But you guys are about to really mess up the podcast, because to me, the greatest game that really kind of sticks out is almost like more of an experience than a game, was the experience at Madison Square Garden when we took our Ridgeview basketball team there, because it was about the total experience. It was about how many players and even coaches get an opportunity in an exhibition game to play in Madison Square Garden? Uh, to me, very few. To me, it's the mecca of basketball. We had an opportunity, like you said, it was everything about the trip. It was getting on the airplane, and certain guys, like I said, it was really funny. I wish we had cell phone cameras to see their reaction when the plane took off, and then the reaction of guys of getting off the airplane, getting into taxis. Some of them never once rode in a taxi ever before. And I remember we were going to Rucker Park, as a matter of fact. We got on the subway for the first time. And actually, some of the guys struggled going through the turnstiles of the subway, and which I thought was obviously very funny. And all of our guys were really joking, very jovial. And then we get off at the stop to go to Rucker Park. And as we were leaving, there was a couple of homeless guys that were just laying there in the subway. And, all of a sudden they went really quiet. Like that, for some of those guys, might have been one of the first times they see a guy like that before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some real life lessons for them. And to see our guys, we did a little shoot around at Rucker Park there in November, which thankfully really wasn't too cold. Our guys seemed to really enjoy that. And then we had the experience where we met with Coach DiBattista and the Bishop England basketball team, and had a team meal and some activities at the ESPN Zone later that evening. And that was like a college-like experience that our young men had an opportunity to take. And just to walking around New York City, is something. I was going through some of our pictures the other day. And we had a big picture with Troy Kennedy that went with us on the trip. He was standing in front of a big picture of Kobe Bryant, and I sent it to him, and we talked about that trip for a while. And then even the day when we had the opportunity to go to Madison Square Garden, we took the Staten Island ferry that day. So our guys were, there's great pictures of us on the ferry. The guys got to see the Statue of Liberty coming back, and then walking up back towards it, we went through where the Twin Towers had fallen, and it was still very much a construction area. And I'll never forget to this day, there was a gentleman out there that was sharing his story about the Twin Towers and everything that went on during the day. And the engagement on those young men's faces, their eyes and ears listening to the guy tell his story about what was going on that day, was every coach and teacher was jealous of their engagement. They were 100% locked in. So to me, that was valuable. And then we go over to Madison Square Garden. We go through a different entrance. We're underneath the stands. We go to a locker room that was being used by the University of North Carolina because they were playing later that night in a Coaches versus Cancer event. And then we go out and play a really good exhibition game against Bishop England. Now, the sad thing is we did lose, but it was a really good game, to play in Madison Square Garden. Just let that sink in a little bit. For these high school kids, there are probably not many high school players that get an opportunity to play exhibition game in Madison Square Garden. But we did. But to me, and to have you, Brian, and you, Chris, what are some things that you guys remember from that trip?
You want to know what I remember? I remember us trying to track down Coach Letzum, and we were walking through Times Square, and he hopped out of a cab and met us there. It was like a totally random thing. Because cell phones weren't as easy to text back then and stuff, and he was coming in from somewhere else, and I don't know why I remember that. And I remember him literally jumping out of the cab, and we were all there. We're like, "Oh, Coach, how's it going?"
I tell you, you hit it on the head about the gentleman down near Ground Zero. I don't know if I've seen that picture of our guys just locked in years, but it's imprinted in my head of just him showing. If I remember, it was a 3-ring binder with pictures, yes. And he would and he would just tell a story, and I know you're right. It was 100% present and locked in there. That's something that I'll never forget. And for me, it was a real thrill to be back in that building. I'd been to be able to be a part of that for South Carolina in a couple of NIT championships, and the smell of the building. Like it's something. There's two buildings that I know if somebody blindfolded me and put me in the building, I would know where I was. And one of them's Frank McGuire Arena, Carolina Coliseum, and the other one's Madison Square Garden. And I don't know if it's the elephants or if the circus had just been there or something. There's always that similar smell in the garden, and just to be able to see our guys running around that floor, like you say, is just the world's most famous arena that two groups from South Carolina, but specifically for our group to be able to play on that floor is just, it's absolutely incredible. And again, just a testament to your vision and Debo's vision too, but just for you to be able to put that trip together was just, it was nuts, and I loved every minute of it.
Well, it was a great trip. And then, we talked about the Madison Square Garden part, but to me, one of the best parts of the trip too was I believe it was the next day where we went to, you alluded to earlier, took the train to St. Benedict's. And we took the train over and then walked up a hill about a mile or two to St. Benedict's, and probably not exactly the nicest part of town. From what I remember, to scrimmage St. Benedict, who was coached at the time by Coach Danny Hurley, and their team was so good.
Mm-hmm.
They were so talented, but our guys, I thought, played fairly well and played with no fear. And I felt like that helped give us a little bit of confidence. I mean, St. Benedict's beat us, but we weren't completely outmatched the entire time. We were playing against some high level talent, and just, that experience alone, to me, just doing that was really, really good for our program. I'll never forget. It was probably a few weeks later. I had an opportunity to talk to Coach Bob Hurley. And we were just talking about something. I mentioned that what I took our team did to go play his son in an exhibition, and he told us, he's like, "You took a bunch of guys, and you walked through downtown Newark, and you did that." He goes, "Coach Roy Williams went up there, and he got his car stolen up there." And I was like, "Yeah, that probably wasn't the smartest move on my part at the time. Probably, as an athletic director, you probably have an issue with that." But thankfully, we got through there, and I did stand very close to Coach Letson at the time, who provided a nice bit of security for us as we walked through there. But it was just a overall really good cultural experience for us. And the trip was about basketball, but it wasn't about basketball. It was about these guys taking their first flight. It was about these guys experiencing, things as a team. It was experiencing ground zero. It was experiencing a place like Rucker Park, having great pizza on the side of the street. I mean, it was a lot of those different things that, when I talk to some of our former players, they still love that trip. And to me, we're talking about a trip and a game, but that experience to me was probably one of my favorite that I've ever been a part of.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the experience, Coach. The summer coach Darren Horn took over South Carolina. We had a chance to go to Central Europe, to Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Austria on one of those summer trips. And we had a chance to go to a concentration camp in the Czech Republic. And it was the same sort of thing you were talking about with 9/11. Like, the guys were laughing, having a good time in all these different places we went. But when we went to a concentration camp, the mood was decidedly different the second we stepped off the bus at this place. And, most of them had an idea of what went on at something like a concentration camp, but they had no idea until we walked around and the tour guide told us all about it. And like you said, you could see the locked in, that the kids were locked in on, this is completely different than anything they had experienced so far in their young lives.
I'm a big believer in experiences. That teaches you a lot more than anything you're going to watch on TV. You're going to listen to people talk. When you can go see, feel, and touch and smell different things, that will teach you so much.
Coach Rosefield, anything else?
I tell you what, that it's a great story. I can't think of anything else with that trip that we talked about it throughout the whole episode here. It's just pretty neat to kind of relive that, and then hate to ruin your surprise there with that one, but no, I think that dovetailed really, really nicely. It was really, really neat.
Well, Coach, we like to wrap things up here by we ask this question. If I asked a player who played for you in 2005 and I asked a player who played for you in 2017, what would they say is the one thing or a couple of things you say over and over again? It could be a coaching point. It could be sort of a funny quip. It could be something you always yell during a game. What's the one thing they're sitting around with their buddies going, Coach Combs always used to say blank.
There's probably a couple. Two of them that come to mind. Next play. I say that way too much. Next play, next play. And then one of my other sayings, I say, all right, tonight is the most important game of your lives. Because reality is, when you're playing, it should be the most important game. I want every game that we ever play to be the most important game that we play, because it's the only game you can control. You can't control anything that happened in the past. You can't control happens anything 2 weeks from now, 2 days from now. You can only control what's there. So next play, and tonight is the most important game that we'll play, are the two biggest.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Next play. That's again, music to my ears. It's why are we going to dwell on the past? Let's go ahead and we got next play. We got another one coming. What a great game, because that next play is coming quick in basketball. So, John, just can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us for our podcast here. I know that you've got a couple of things going on. You've got your own podcast, but what would you like to share with our listeners about maybe ways to follow you on social media, about your podcast, and anything that you'd like to promote?
Well, I'd love for people, they can come connect with us on social media at John Combs 98. Also did start a podcast. It's at Ball Meadow State, where we just try to interview different coaches and have some fun. I'd love for people to come follow us on Twitter and get a chance to listen to a couple of our episodes.
Well, great. Well, yeah, it's I can tell you from experience listening to it, it's fantastic content. You're doing a great job with that. And again, can't thank you enough for coming on. And so for my co-host, Chris de Blasio, I am Brian Rosefield, and thank you for listening to this episode of The Greatest Games.